So to make our endpoint, at first inside this app folder, we need to have a new folder called API. So all our endpoints will go under this API folder. So I'm gonna have a new folder and call that contacts. Okay. So our API URL is gonna be API/contacts. Now inside here, inside this contacts folder, we need to have a file for our route. It's gonna be route.js. Make sure to name this route, otherwise it wouldn't work. So our first request is going to be a post request. I'm going to add this function here. Make sure to add post with capital letter. It's going to be this arrow function. Now it's going to be asynchronous function, and inside here we need to get this request. So this request will help us get data from the client side. Now inside here we need to have a try and catch block. At first we need to connect our database. So I'm gonna write here await and connect. Make sure to import this from @connect/connect. Okay. Now we need to receive all our inputs name using this request, and they are all coming from await request.json. Okay. Now down here we need to create our first data inside our database. So I'm gonna write here const new contacts, which is equal to await. Now it is time to import our schema name. So it was contacts. Contacts, make sure to import that from @contact schema/contact .create, and we need to create all of this data. Now down here we need to return a response. It's gonna be next response.json, and we are going to send this new contact. Okay. Now for this error, we just show error.message. Okay guys, we have successfully added our first API. Now we need to test this. So to test our API, we need to install a new extension which is called postman. Just look for postman inside VS Code and install this extension. Okay. Once you have installed this, you will get this icon down here. Click that and make your new HTTP request. As you can see in the left side, we have all our HTTP request type, and in here we can add our URL. So our API URL is going to be this localhost 3000/API/contacts. As you can see, we have this API contacts. Okay. Now in here we need to click this body row, and it's going to be JSON type. Now we need to change our request type here. It's gonna be post. Inside here we need to write all our data. So I'm gonna copy and paste them from here, and we need to add a value for them. Okay. Now if I click the send here, you can see my data has been added inside my database. Now let's check it inside MongoDB. I'm gonna open my browser here, and you need to click this browse collections. Okay. Inside here, as you can see, this is my collections name and this is my module's name here. It's connects. So we have this new data inside this contacts. Okay. So we are done with the post request. Now let's see how we can add that using our form. So I'm gonna close this for now, and in here we need to open our form. At first we need to have some use states here. So I'm gonna write here const form set form, which is equal to use state, and inside here we need to have an object of all our input name. So the first one is going to be this full name. Okay, now we need to get our inputs value using this use state hook. So I'm gonna just send this here. Now we are going to receive that inside this reusable input. So inside this input, we need to have an on change. So I'm gonna write a new function here. And we need to receive this event. Okay. Now down here we need to return set form. And we need to spread this form. Okay. So now we need to get our inputs value using their name. So we need to write here e.target.name. We are going to get their e.target.value. So we are going to get their values based on their name. Okay, we have already added their names here. So we are going to add this onChange function, and we need to write handle function here. Okay. Now let's check if we can get our inputs value. So in here, at first I'm going to have a handle function here. So I'm going to call that handle submit function, which is equal to again this event. Now we need to add this handle submit form to our form here on submit, and add this function here. Inside here, at first we need to prevent the default behavior. As you can see, if I click this, I will have this auto refresh here. So we need to prevent that. So I'm going to write here prevent default, and I'm going to just console log this form here. Okay. Now let's check it. I'm going to fill these inputs here. Now if I inspect and click this button here, you can see we could successfully get all our data from our inputs. Okay guys, our form is ready. Now we need to send our form's data to our backend using our API. So we are going to use another library called MERN Stack React-query, which is the new version of reac-query. So I'm going to copy this npm command from here. Now open the terminal, and now just paste this here. And also we are going to use axios with the combination of this library. Now hit the enter here. Okay. Now let's see how we can connect this to our application. If I click this quick start here, as you can see, we need to wrap our application using this query client provider. So since the Next JS is using server-side rendering by default, we need to add that in a new component. So inside this connect folder, I'm going to have a new component and call that query connect. Okay, .js, and I'm going to generate this React code here. Okay, so at first we need to change this to be use client. And now we are going to import two things in here. The first one is going to be this query client. I'm going to change this with this div here. Okay, we need to import this. Now inside here we are going to render children. As you can see, we need to send this as client to our application. So I'm going to copy this from here and paste it down here. Now let's import it. Again, import this from reac-query, and we need to send this as client. Okay, make sure to add this with capital letter here. Okay, now let's import that inside our layout component. So in here we have this layout. Now you can see we have the children here. So we are going to wrap this with our new component, and the component was query connect. Okay, and just paste that inside here. Okay, now let's check if we have any error. As you can see, we don't have any error for now. It means that our React query has been successfully connected to our application. Now let's make our HTTP request. So again, in the root of my application, I need to have a new folder, and I'm gonna call that fetch data. Inside here, we need to have a file, fetchdata.js. So our first endpoint was post request. We need to have this function here. I'm gonna call that add data, which is equal to this arrow function. Again, it's gonna be this asynchronous function. Now we need to have a try and catch block here. So we are going to use axios in here. So I'm gonna write new data, which is equal to await axios.post, and we need to add our endpoint here. So if you remember, our endpoint was API/contacts. Now we need to send our data. So I'm gonna send this data and receive this data from our form. Okay, now we are gonna send an error message here, and all we need to do is just return this new data. Okay, now let's move to our form component. Now to send data to our API, we are going to use mutation from react-query. So in here, I'm going to write const. We are going to get this muted, is loading, is error. They are coming from use mutation. Okay, and as you can see, we have some options here. Now let's check them inside documentation. I'm gonna open the documentation here, and as you can see inside this use mutation hook, we need to have our function here, and also this onSuccess function. Now we are going to copy all of them from here. Okay, and we are going to make an object inside this use mutation hook and just paste them inside. Okay, now we need to change this query key, and it's gonna be this contact, and our function is going to be this one. I'm gonna replace this with add data and make sure to import that. Now this is a function. We can send our data using this function. So in here, we need to write muted and just write our form here. Okay, now let's check if our HTTP request is working or not. So in here, I'm going to fill these inputs again. If I click this submit here, you can see we don't have any error. Now let's check that inside our database. So I'm gonna open my database here, and if I refresh it here, as you can see, we have two data. So this is our new data that we just add using our form. Now you can write this as loading also. So in here we have this submit button. So you can say here, if there is loading, we want to print this loading text. Otherwise, we want to print this submit. Okay, you can change this to be submitting. If I click this button, you can see we see this submitting. Okay, now we want to be redirected to our home page when we have submitted our form. So to do that, again we need to use router hook. As you can see, we have already imported that. So I'm gonna copy this here and write router.push this home page. Okay, now let's check it. If I fill the form again and click the submit here, as you can see, I will be redirected to this home page. Okay guys, we are done with the post request. Our next request is going to be get. So we are going to get all the data from backend and display them inside this table.